Hello and welcome to MacFormat's WWDC Extravaganza. I'm Chris Finn.
I'm Matt Bolton.
And I'm Paul Hudson.
The reason we have Paul with us today is because WWDC is, of course, a developer conference, and Paul is a real-life developer. He is the senior developer here at Future. He's ours. We own him. We're going to talk about the stuff that happened at the WWDC conference, the keynote on Monday, just gone. The way this is going to work, you'll see this is a special. It's a longer show if you look at your little time remaining down here. We're going to split it into three sections. I've got three things I want to talk about. Matt's got three things he wants to talk about. And, surprise, surprise, Paul has three things he wants to talk about. 5 minutes each as usual, though. And let's start then with three things even, that I want to talk about. So my first 5 minutes is on Mac plus iOS, because this was it was a good keynote. Let's say that from the off. It was a really important keynote that really advanced the state of the art for Apple, and really importantly, this is one where the Mac and the iOS platforms are becoming much more of a peer.
Continuity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, continuity is an important technical aspect of it, but I think more importantly to me was the kind of sense, the spirit that Apple is ramping iOS quite quickly, and it's looking at them much more as equal partners. Apple's always never thought of the iOS devices as peripherals, but people have.
The public has. Ramping quickly, but iOS 7 was actually kind of a stall as far as
functionality. Yes. Yeah,
it was largely focused on.
Well, iOS 7 had lots of functionality features, but everyone was focusing on fixing the design right first. So no one used the fancy features because everyone's doing the design.
Because everyone can use Photoshop, but they can't use Xcode.
Exactly, that's what it is. Yeah.
We have had a bit of a funny. We've had a year with lots of really good new apps, but nothing. But it's redesigns of stuff that already existed for the most part, rather than. As Paul says, anything actually new functionality-wise.
Which is a fair point, but I think the point still stands that this was a definite sea change in the relationship between the Mac and the iOS devices. And so let's talk about a little bit about continuity, which is and handoff, the feature that's explicitly the sort of consumer-facing part of this, which is that if you're working in one app on your iPhone, you can then put down your iPhone, turn to your Mac, and keep doing that same task. It's built into all the first-party apps, and it was confirmed that you can add API. There are APIs for it, so developers can do it in their own apps.
There are.
Which is fucking cool. That is really, I think that's a genuinely huge
It's
thing.
remarkable. There's one cunning caveat which was revealed after the keynote. Keynote looks brilliant, swipe up, goes from mail to mail and iOS to Mac. Brilliant, very clever. In the later talk, they mentioned, and by the way, you have to find your own way of passing the actual data across.
Okay.
So if you're working in like a big picture here, transfer to here, you have to transfer that picture somehow to the Mac by yourself. It just handles they were editing a picture, they're at zoom level 200%, at whatever file names, not the actual data. So there's still some work for devs to do. We're not lazy,
But presumably...
But very cool.
You could use iCloud for that?
What, the new mail drop thing, iCloud Drive, who knows what. But you see them do it instantly between like Word documents, or Pages documents, I guess.
Yeah.
And is it that fast in reality? Is that just sped up for demonstration purposes?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff built into it as well with trying to get the proximity of devices working intelligently, which will be interesting to see as well. And that obviously ties in with what they're doing with allowing you to take phone calls on the Mac. So your phone rings and it might be in the next room, but you can still answer the phone call.
Never again do you hear a phone ringing and you're like, where's that phone? I'm running around, it's under the sofa somewhere, cushions,
Now you can just lazily lose your phone because you don't need to worry about finding
it. Again.
It's somewhere.
But they have made a slight change to that. They've said when the phone gets down to emergency power level, it will ping its location to Apple now. It's an option inside settings.
Oh, that's nice.
So even if it's not set to do that, it will now do it once at least before it goes dead, so it's under the
last place it was.
Exactly.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
But this was big deal because before you could obviously do this sort of stuff before you could start an email, for example, and then save it to drafts and then go and pick it up elsewhere. But it's the seamlessness with which this does it, and it's that brilliant thing of Apple where by controlling the entire experience, it makes experience greater than the sum of its parts. It's the thing that nobody else really can do because nobody else has that complete end-to-end ecosystem of the devices and the services working in harmony.
Microsoft could do this. It could have done it, but it's always the most telling that it hasn't.
Yeah.
That it really could have done this the entire time, but it's too busy thinking about trying to turn everything into a Windows PC rather than just kind of going, well, you can't mash them all up. So why don't we just make it easy to use whatever you want to use?
Android has done it too, just unofficially.
Well,
in bits and unofficially here by various developers, and you can string the whole thing together into a greater bit. That's a lot of time. The way Apple have done it, that lovely little mail icon that appears next to the dock, very, very simple, very, very nice, and a great choice.
I haven't seen the UI for how it appears on iOS.
Yeah, little button.
There's the sliding up from the lock screen.
Is that like the thing?
Was one of them.
That's where the Starbucks button will appear.
The Starbucks icon, yes,
that's
the one we've seen. So with that feature, if you're it knows where you are, so it can put contextual aware things on there.
Yes.
Is that a step toward contextual aware ads and the iBeacon stuff? It's certainly an option.
It's now,
the technical pieces are there at least.
Swipe here for this, swipe here for this, here for this, and here for that.
It makes sense for something like
it's all over the place.
Passbook at the airport.
Yeah.
But
they already have a functionality for that in the home screen already. Anyway, so that's 5 minutes up. This Mac and iOS stuff is going to be a big deal. It's, as I say, making them equal partners in your life, basically. The next thing I want to talk about then, we talked about cloud stuff really briefly, was Cloud Drive. Cloud Drive then is...
iCloud Drive.
iCloud Drive, sorry, yes. God, no, not the... Is that Microsoft's one?
No.
That's SkyDrive.
No, that's
OneDrive.
OneDrive it is now.
Yeah, sorry, it was. Yeah. Who knows?
So, yeah, thank you. Specifically talking about iCloud Drive, which is Apple's Dropbox, essentially. And it really seems to be Apple's Dropbox, in as much as... And it's also Apple's iDisk, hilariously. The now deprecated iDisk function that Apple used to have as part of .Mac and
I did find there were a few things at the keynote. Like, there's loads of stuff that Apple has clearly just taken from other operating systems, various other operating systems.
It has allowed itself to be inspired by...
and is including it because they're good features, which is, fair enough.
Yeah.
But when everyone's kind of going, oh, now iCloud's ripped off Dropbox, you're thinking, well, I remember before Dropbox.
Yes, iCloud has ripped off itself on this occasion with iDisk. But it was funny because iDisk was a terrific feature as part of MobileMe.Mac, and then Apple canned it. And that's bringing it all back. But
didn't Steve Jobs say he's going to kill Dropbox? Go after Dropbox.
Yeah, well,
in 2011.
What he said was because there was talk about mergers, acquisitions, buying it, and they said no. And Jobs threw a hissy fit and said, "You guys have a feature, not a product." Mm-hmm. Turns out Apple has just implemented that feature into its product.
Yeah. But what I've been saying, I've brought up that quote a few times when I've been writing about kind of Dropbox versus iCloud for various websites and things like that. The thing I've always said is, but Dropbox's feature is so much better than yours, Apple.
It's true, but that is changing. Because you're a very heavy Dropbox user. I use it a little bit as well. But for me, the main reason to keep using it was that it hooked into so many different services. So I could have just a file sitting on Dropbox, and I could then choose to edit it from this app or from this app or from this app, which iCloud didn't like to do. iCloud before Monday was siloed and compartmentalized per app, and it's still like that, except you can work between apps.
Backpedal a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
It's no longer just app restricted to sandboxes.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing because this is you have a file system in iOS now. Which is heresy.
Same for the old when they said, there'll never be a task manager in iOS, and of course you can start killing apps and stuff in it.
And also in iOS 8, you'll also be able to see which apps are using battery life as well, which again is a very Androidian thing to do.
Androidian, nice.
Yeah, but with iCloud Drive, so as we say, you get a file system in iOS, so you will see all the files in there. You can chuck anything on there that you want. If you've got apps that are iCloud enabled, they appear in their own little folders.
When you say you can chuck anything on there you want, do you mean on iOS?
Well, you can chuck anything on there you want from the Mac, and presumably, I don't know, can apps...
There's no iCloud app for iOS announced yet, so...
No. Well, it seems to be that the way it's going to work in iOS is that if you in an iCloud-enabled app and you hit open, it will bring up the sheet with, obviously, your app's documents inside its folder, but you can also browse other stuff as well, so you could, in theory, for example, chuck a text edit document on from your Mac, just loose into iCloud Drive, be in Pages on iOS, and then open that file up from there, which seems like a reasonable, to me, way of doing things.
It is adding the file system in, but only for people who really want to go and dig out the file system.
True.
It's not like...
Correct. And in that particular circumstance, because you can now finally move files from your Mac to your iOS device without futzing around, because the transfer is now enabled across Bluetooth in these devices, so finally, it's not a problem.
That's going to be a big deal, the fact that, as you say, that AirDrop now allows you to move not just iOS to iOS, but iOS to Mac and Mac to iOS as well.
Which has been screaming the obvious for about a year now.
Yeah, it's just, there must have been something technical that was holding it back, because why you wouldn't immediately implement that, why you would have features called the same thing that didn't work across devices is bizarre.
There's just no continuity is what you're saying. And now suddenly there is continuity.
With a capital C.
Yeah. As far as Dropbox and iCloud Drive go, I'm not going to be able to withdraw myself from Dropbox, if only because of the features like versioning and recovering deleted files and things like that iCloud Drive just doesn't offer as far as they've announced or mentioned.
Obviously, like Time Machine would on your local Mac, for example, but
iCloud does support versioning in the background, but iCloud Drive does not at this time. So I reckon that's a coming soon sort of thing. Let's switch it on at some point.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, but it does look like a useful thing, and it's reasonably cheap as well.
Very cheap.
It was 99 cents for 20 gigabytes of space, which is, I think, we worked out about a quarter of the price of Dropbox's pricing once you get up to the sort of 100 gig level.
So that's £1, presumably, isn't it?
Well, it's about the same
conversion, let's face
price.
Oh, I can't remember. I did work it out, but I've forgotten what I worked out.
It's about a quarter of the price for about a quarter of the...
Well,
it's like a fifth of the price.
So
for
I got for the large Dropbox plan. I
was
want a 200 gig Dropbox plan, which is $4 a month on iCloud, which is very, very cheap. 200 gigs. So I could save money by switching to iCloud.
200 gigs, $4 a month.
Yes, very, very cheap.
Where did you find all the tiers?
On Mashable, actually. It's right here on the Mashable site. That's what they actually announced during the keynote. Yeah. And they have tiers up to 1 terabyte.
Which they haven't announced the pricing for. But that was actually what I was getting confused with. I was comparing it as a quarter of the price of the current iCloud pricing.
Right. Dropbox now has to change their pricing. Yeah. Because Google's offering it so cheap, Apple's offering it so cheap, it's just a matter of time.
Which is good.
I know, hooray! Thanks, Apple.
Like, hopefully, I'd rather Dropbox gave me just more storage for the same price, really. Yeah. Like, the amount of money I'm currently paying them is fine.
Yeah.
So...
There we go, iCloud Drive. The file system in iOS for the first time, really, and possible capitulation on Apple's part on that one. Third and last from me is the keyboard. iOS 8 will allow you to swap in different keyboards, which I think is a massive deal. Not in and of itself, but because every time I talk to Android people, some of my best friends use Android. Let's be clear.
I thought you meant as a hello, Chris.
Every time I talk to Android folks, or I hear Android people talking in their adenoidal voices, the fact that Android can support separate keyboards is always held up as one of the big reasons they will stay. They want Swipe, they want SwiftKey, whatever it is. They want their own little peccadillo there, and it also struck me that this was more of a sort of entrenched viewpoint rather than an actual pragmatic viewpoint. But regardless, I've seen a lot of people saying, Apple, I'm coming home. They were with iPhone, they've gone off to Android.
Sobbing
and this
all the way.
This is them
just
now.
for the keyboard?
Yeah.
Wow.
Or rather, that was what drove them away.
Yeah.
Well, we say that. It probably is a combination of... there will be the more advanced multitasking that Android kind of can do, but the keyboard is probably the...
So it's
the one
user-facing...
It's probably people who've kind of gone, I've got used to a lot of Android's features. The keyboard is the one thing I can't live without.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, iOS is adding lots of the other features that I like, but it's adding the key thing that I'm relying on. Yeah.
And one of the... Hell's teeth, forgot to set this again. One of the important things that meant Apple didn't do this before was, or rather, one of the oft-cited reasons was security. In this case, as far as I remember from the keynote, everything's held locally. Keyboards may not communicate with the cloud.
Well, they may, if you allow them.
Correct. It will ask
you.
I
see.
They can request permission.
Yeah.
Which, I guess, the purpose of including that is for learning behaviour.
Yes, I saw an interview with, oh Lord, I can't remember. I think it was SwiftKey, where they'd said that... they started talking about the Pope in the middle of this interview. I got very confused. And they were saying it was because the Cardinal... I forget his name before he became the Pope. His name was never used. In people didn't type his name. But obviously everybody suddenly was talking about this new cardinal. So they pushed an update out to the keyboard so that it was expecting that particular sequence of letters for it. So that kind of very reactive updating is a big deal.
Presumably also possibly cloud syncing your things you type most often.
Yeah. But it's not just about third-party keyboards, because the Apple keyboard itself is getting an improvement, and it looks really cool. Well, it doesn't look really cool.
It looks quite ugly.
It looks, the functionality is very cool, because not only now will it learn your words as it does now, but it will also change the kind of things that it's auto-correcting for based on who you're talking to.
Yes,
and,
it will do.
And suggest answers to questions.
Yes. Correct. Dinner, full stop.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I like saying to my wife all the time. You know?
But you say that because that's one of the examples. It's like, do you want to go for dinner or to a movie tonight? And the three options that appear for you to complete are dinner, a movie, and I don't know is the screenshot. But I'm assuming that if my wife texted me, would you like spaghetti or fusilli with your bolognese tonight? It wouldn't just say dinner, a movie, I don't know. It would say spaghetti, fusilli.
Maybe it would just say I don't know 3 times.
Just like...
Which one's fusilli again?
One's a shortcut to the dictionary.
But that kind of really contextual stuff is really cool. It's funny because Apple always manages to surprise me, because I do really like the standard stock Android keyboard, the autocorrect bar that comes up above the keyboard, the fact that when you tap back on a word, those autocorrections come back up really obvious that you can select them.
Does Windows Phone still have a basically identical
absolutely
setup?
And I always kind of really wished that Apple would introduce that to its keyboard, and Apple in its inimitable style went, screw that, we don't want to do that, we want to do something better, we want to be much more intelligent about the context of what you're writing. How well it works, we don't know, obviously.
It's a bit like the copy-paste thing, where it was lagging behind, and then it did it better than everyone else did. Well, I don't know if this is better than everyone else, but the point was that it nailed it once it...
I think it feels to me that this is the kind of thing they couldn't have done earlier, because with that extra bar plus the Safari back, next and done bar, there isn't a lot of space in your old style, non-5-star iPhones. Now there is, so there's a bit more screen space here, extra pixels, we might as well put some more stuff in there.
I saw somebody commenting that keyboards, third-party keyboards, won't allow you to move the cursor, and then somebody commented, yes they will, such and such has already done it. So you can actually now, it's one of the big complaints about the iOS keyboards that you've got to use the loop to move. But now third-party keyboards will allow you to have.
Wasn't that a lovely video from a few years ago? Someone said just tapping on the keyboard and swiping across.
It was really a little contextual thing, but never
released that.
Now they can. Finally they can.
Do you know what the release pipeline is for keyboards? Are they sold through the App Store? Will there be a dedicated section for them?
Well, there might be a section for extensions, perhaps, generally. I think extensions are installed through apps.
Yeah, they're installed through apps, so I don't know.
But, so keyboard.
Oh, so maybe there's a SwiftKey app that just is in the App Store, and you download it, and then suddenly you've got a new keyboard.
But confusingly, the keyboard stuff is going to be fantastic, and I think it will bring a lot of Android users back into the fold, which is a big deal. But that's enough from me. Let's now.
Do you want them back?
We love them. That's it. Some of my best friends. Let's talk about what
because I love
Matt wants to talk about now.
Okay, so inevitably, the first thing that I want to talk about is Metal, which is Apple's new...
We're doing that because...
Tom's shaking his head out.
We will, at this point, cut to Tom's camera to see the shake. The reason we're doing that is because Craig Federighi did that as he was introducing Metal, which is not the musical genre.
It isn't?
It's not. No.
What is it then, Mr. Bolton?
I was so confused. I thought you were going to keep talking.
No, I was segueing.
Anyway, what Metal is new low-level graphics APIs, equivalent to AMD's Mantle technology on the PC, for anyone who's familiar with such a thing, and sort of equivalent to the latest version of DirectX, and effectively a replacement for OpenGL, which is the graphics rendering technology, the graphics language used right now for making games happen on iOS and also on the Mac, but they haven't said anything about the Mac yet. They've only said about iOS. So the whole point of a low-level API is that at the moment, when you're sending stuff to the GPU to do, a lot of it has to go through the processor first, through the CPU, and that's usually a bottleneck, and it restricts how much you can actually get done on the GPU. So the point of these new APIs is you don't need to do that anymore. You can send them directly to the GPU and stuff happens better and faster. How much faster? Apple, as ever, cherry-picked a random figure that has no meaning to real life and said 10 times faster. And that probably is true for that one specific thing that represents 6% of the total stuff you might do in a given frame.
Is the phrase.
But Mantle, which is AMD's desktop thing that is very similar to Metal, apparently I've seen some conflicting figures, but I've seen quite a few people say that its performance can improve by about 50% just by using Mantle instead of DirectX 11. It would be, because DirectX 12 isn't out yet. One of the things is when you've got all these competing graphics options, the way it tends to work is you've got engines that
Unity,
middleware that the developers use to build their stuff, and the point is that with something like Unity, that you build the game once and then Unity can output it for lots of different options by specifically you say I want to output for iOS, and it can include all of Mantle's code for you, or it can include all of the OpenGL code if you want to do Android and stuff like that. So the idea is that it's not a huge amount of work for developers, even if it is a huge amount of work for the people at Unity.
That's their job.
There's a lot of stuff we don't know, though. We don't know, for example, if people are writing shaders and various other things that run in their game, or have written them specifically for OpenGL, will they be compatible with Metal, or will they need to completely rewrite actually a lot of the stuff that makes their game look good on screen?
You were talking about how it was an equivalent to DirectX 11 and
DirectX 12.
Sorry, I thought you then corrected yourself to say 11. Sorry. Anyway, DirectX modern, and you were saying that it is actually almost sort of feature for feature, in as much as you could say we want to do this thing in here, and we've agreed on a common standard of the kinds of things we want to do, and then Metal is doing the same sort of things.
Yeah, so that's what I've read. I have no way to confirm this for myself. I know what you're saying, where I sort of got wrong. Initially, I saw someone say that it was very, very close in terms of what it could do, not necessarily in terms of what the final result would look like, but what options it had to DirectX 11, which is the current desktop standard. But now someone's saying it is more like DirectX 12, which is the next one that's coming out soon. And basically the point is you don't have missing features if you want to port from making it in DirectX 12 to Metal. You don't suddenly have to somehow fudge around the fact that you were using this really important option and it's just not there in Metal.
What's going to come down to is performance, realistically. And what Apple said was very precisely saying in their benchmarks, it's 10 times faster for draw calls. That's the drawing. How long those calls actually take, who knows? That's fixing. It isn't changed between OpenGL and Metal. That's the same thing. And of course, fill rate. You've got Retina iPad screens, insane number of pixels. That's also a fixed constant that isn't going to go anywhere. So we're going to have to see actual games being changed to see what actually happens. Yeah. We don't know yet.
But there is one other big advantage to Metal, which is that it will be the first time that developers can use the GPU for general computational tasks.
Ah, I didn't know that. I hadn't picked up on that.
I think OpenCL, which is what's used on the Mac for using the GPU for computation, is possible on iOS, but I think only Apple is able to use it using stuff like the core technologies, I think. I'm not sure if that's definitely true, but I read it at some point. But the point of Metal is it will enable developers to do that as well, but in a proprietary way. Classic.
Can I be cheeky and toss in one tiny thing? I heard the buzzer go on. Because SpriteKit and SceneKit are Apple's own platforms, like Renderware, like your example, Unity. Presumably they'll also back onto Metal. We don't know yet. I don't think anyone's said yet.
I think they mentioned that
they must do, surely.
Yeah.
If they do, boom, every existing game written for that platform will get a lot faster for free. And you'd think that would be enabled immediately. So if a game's on iOS 8 was a bit laggy, it'll just get faster when switched to Metal, which is great.
Lovely. Next.
Next is extensibility.
Oh, this is
the extensions.
This is the other big.
There are lots of big things.
I would say this was the other big. In fact, this is probably the biggest.
You're not a developer, Chris.
The biggest thing. No, I'm a punter. I'm a
developers.
Yeah, I would say in the comments that. So extensions is basically apps can talk to each other to a certain degree for the first time, not by doing it over the cloud, by just going from one app sandbox to another, because the difficulty has been that apps are sealed away in Perspex containers
for very good reasons,
for safety reasons, so that you can't download something malicious that then starts taking all your information from other apps and things like that. So what Apple's doing is enabling a controlled way for apps to give things to each other, certain things.
So it has allowed this in the past, but for an incredibly small subset of stuff.
No, it's been allowed for a lot of things in the past. but because sorry to jump over you, you can pass what's called a custom URL handler from an app to app, and you can pass whatever you like in there. Foo equals bar, one equals bat, yada yada yada, and the application just pick it up and handle it. And there are a handful like calendar things or phones you can do that with built in. But obviously, there's a
you
whole
can write your own URL schema.
Ones that people do. This is much better though.
Yeah,
as I'm sure you'll explain why.
Well, what they've shown off is actually sort of limited in what it seems to offer. It's not as simple as just suddenly everything is going to start whizzily working together and in some lovely Willy Wonka
utopia.
Elaborate contraption on your phone. When they showed off in Safari, they were what looked like Safari extensions, but what they are is they showed off Bing Translate. So there's a Bing app that has the translate function in, and obviously it's got a thing in where it can tell. What they said is, if effectively you be in Safari, you open up the options, the share sheet, and there would be a translate in Bing button, and the Bing app has said that it's capable of doing this. And what will happen is the web page you're on will be fed to the Bing app to translate, and then fed back into Safari
to display.
So it's not like suddenly you've got all this crazy functionality popping up within other apps.
It could be though, because they also showed off the photo stuff.
But the photo stuff,
it's different. That's different. Karen,
the photo stuff. There's so much from the keynote that we don't know about that. All they said is filters can appear in the Photos app.
So what we understand is that Photos is a particular use case they've identified and solved with extensions. It's not everything can be an extension now. Photo filters can be an extension. Safari things can be an extension. But only a couple of more things can. It's not suddenly everything can be an extension.
Okay.
It's within Apple's little remit of things allowed.
From what they showed us in the keynote with photos, we don't know how how the filters actually got into the Photos app. Did Apple have to write a receiver effectively for the filters, and then do all your filters have to be presumably written in such a way,
the filters are core
or
image
identified
anyway.
in such a way? Yeah, probably. But that doesn't, not just everything that is core image is going to be picked up. There has to be identification, and the Apple app will have to be rewritten to receive it.
Correct.
So it's quite a sort of specific set of things as far as I can see.
It's a toe in the water, I think, at this point. They'll expand on it almost certainly, allow more things. But at this point, it's just 3 or 4 things, from what I understand, can be extensions.
Right.
We'll see. But that's a big step forward, isn't it, to be fair? And they've kept in place the very strict security isolation. So apps can't just read in and out stuff from the system or from other apps. It has to be explicitly passed and received as packages, like you said.
In many cases, it seems to be kind of smoothing what we're currently doing with OpenWidth. Because I can take a photo from Photos and open with an app that's got a photo filter thing built in, and then go to that app and do editing. I can take a web page in Safari, send it to Bing, and then do the translate in the Bing app. What it's doing is meaning I don't have to leave the original app to do this stuff. It's smoothing out my
and hopefully a lot of the stuff that Apple had in place meant you had to do a lot of A, round tripping, and B, you get a lot of duplicate files littering all over your system in various places as you're doing OpenWidth and that kind of thing. But hopefully that's going to be less true if we can pull bits of functionality from other apps into some other apps to allow us to work on them in a more realistic way. What isn't it? What doesn't it allow us to do?
Apple, like I said, have kept very strict security in place, and this is something that they've actually got even stronger on this release. It's very impressive, add even more security. So rest assured, readers, watch Stephen, that apps just can't read across the system and grab your contacts like you might expect. What will happen is almost certainly that the Photos app will pass a small package of data to an extension and then modify it and pass it back in place. Sort of like the way Photoshop has its edit in line thing. You can have smart layers, something. The other document doesn't know the first one exists. You just save it, close it, and it goes back to the first one seamlessly.
So just quickly, how restricted is it by Apple? Can I write an app and I write effectively like an API that I intend to receive data?
Yes, that's
and I can just give that to other developers and say...
Not even that, you give it to the system. It's like the way if you download a Mac app that handles .blob files, it's sitting in your downloads directory, and you find a .blob on your desktop, and right-click it will say open with, and it's just magically found that app.
Yeah.
The app registers itself with a system to handle these files. That's what your app will do when you enable this new API call to receive a packet of data in the format X. the system will know about it, and all other apps that handle X will suddenly be aware of your app.
Okay, so it really is like an extension of the OpenWidth APIs that's already in there. Cool. And finally, the last thing I was going to bring up is HomeKit, which is Apple's framework for home automation, for simplifying it through your device. When I was first reading about it, my initial thought was, why wouldn't you just do this with extensions? Why does this need to be a framework? But if there's, depending on what happens with the limits of extensions, then that's probably going to be that probably would be a bit more trouble than it's worth. But what it is actually fairly simple. The key reason to do it, what that appears to me, is Siri.
Let's talk about what it is first. So it's an agreed on set of standards for some home automation stuff.
No, it isn't.
Okay. Let's talk about,
no, Chris, get out.
That's not what it is. So tell me what it is.
What it is a method of passing information about what home automation systems you have from one app to another and throughout iOS.
Through a standardized system?
Yeah, but not a set of standards.
Ooh.
Okay.
Semantically cunning. The key thing
Apple
is
has set a standardized way of apps to recognize data from other home automation apps. But that's not like, it's not like all home automation stuff will now be running on a set of standards.
No, sorry,
right.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yep, you're right. That was bad
the slide
language on my part.
showing off like 20 different companies all being supported by HomeKit. That says a lot to me. Same thing with the health stuff. They said, listen, we're not inventing new standards here. We're not doing new work. We're just saying these guys have done brilliant work. We want to support them in that.
The top level stuff, reading the developer documents, is actually very, very simple. What it is a database of what, basically, where objects are and what services they provide in your home. And we're basically talking about 4 levels. Home, and you can have more than one home, so which premises you're talking about.
For MPs then.
Exactly. Although Apple specifically says they may have 2 homes far away, or you may have, say, a home and a cottage out the back, a guest house. So very California.
Okay.
You've got home, you've got rooms, you've got zones, say upstairs or downstairs, and you've got services. So let's say you've got the garage door opener, the room is garage. You know which home, the room is garage. You probably wouldn't have that attached to a zone, although you might have a zone called outside or something. And then the service is open and close garage door. So you've made a home automation app. You identify what your thing can do in this data format. iOS collates it all and then tells other apps what other automation options there are available on your device at that moment, and then enables grouping of those things so that various apps can potentially tie in and offer those groupings and trigger the events, trigger the garage door opening.
I think an example would help us here.
Garage door opening.
Other than the garage door opening.
Well, because the example was given of bringing it all together of get ready for bed.
Get ready for bed. That was a great
Yes.
example.
And then we'd put all the lights off and close the garage door if it was open. And...
So I'll just keep talking.
Okay.
And then once you've got everything
Feisty
together,
today,
the
isn't
point
it?
is that you can trigger things through Siri. I think this is the really key point.
Yes.
So one of the groupings might be, I'm going to bed. So you'd say, hey Siri.
Which you can do now.
Which you can do to activate Siri, I'm going to bed. And Siri will say, okay, and then presumably something to acknowledge what you've done. I don't know what phrasing that could be.
Sleep tight.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
tell you a story.
I'll do that for you. And the point is, I'm going to bed is turn off all the lights, lock the doors if you've got an electronic lock, close the garage door if it's open.
Which presumably works by pinging all the apps that are registered for garage door and telling them to dim the lights. Otherwise, Apple has to implement all the Philips standards and stuff for doing lights.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The point is, developers will have to tie in what their apps can do into this. Well, it's just a database with these hierarchies, and the point is just to pass around what options there are, and then make the apps do the hard work, do the actual API stuff. So it's quite a simple system as far as I can see. I'm probably missing some stuff because I didn't do it right down.
It doesn't have to be complicated. That's the magic of it.
Yeah.
You want Siri party mode, and Hugh goes to those funny multicolored lights mode, and the music kicks on with boogie nights or something. But it doesn't have to be very hard. It's a lot of small components put together that make it magical.
Exactly. Again, it's one of these things that is everything is stuck separate by sandboxing. Apple is just providing a database that they can all feed into, and then I think Siri really is what they want to get out of HomeKit as much as anything else.
Any Apple engineers watching this, he says, all Apple are doing is just providing a database. You spent 3 years working on this in total silence,
But yeah, it's not like they've invented a new home automation standard, which is sort of what the leaks beforehand almost implied. And I don't know what it means as far as certification. I don't think it'll be anything like the MFI thing. I think it'll just be, do your controls successfully talk to our database? Yes.
Well, iBeacons has got a program, hasn't it? There's a program for iBeacons and an MFI program, as you say, so you never know.
Yeah, it could be, but it wouldn't need hardware certification as far as I can imagine.
Well, it all sounds like a lovely sci-fi future. Let's talk to Paul, though, about some dev stuff.
And it is going to be extremely geeky, I'm afraid. So if you're not a geek, you just hit fast forward. The first thing I want to talk about is CloudKit. Now, I realise you probably think CloudKit sounds quite similar to Cloud Drive / iCloud Drive, depending who you speak to. But it isn't. It's something that's dramatically breakthrough different from Apple. Now, I've sat and watched iOS releases for a long time now, and nothing like CloudKit's ever been announced before, because for a change, it happens on the server. So all the APIs so far, whether it's navigation stuff or your game centers, multitasking, all on the local device. CloudKit is remote storage for stuff, like iCloud in a way, but it's only in far as where it's stored as iCloud. It's stored in Apple's big, massive data centers they have. Fine, they're all stored there. This is very different because myself as a developer, I now get a vast swathe of storage.
Petabyte.
A petabyte.
No,
it's 1 petabyte. So to clarify this, a petabyte, so a gigabyte, everyone knows gigabyte, right? 1,000 gigabytes is a terabyte. 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte. So I get 1 million gigabytes for my app to store on Apple servers for free, which is, quite frankly, bonkers, I think. And of course, it's backed up by, you get, on top of that, 10 terabytes of database storage, basically as much as you can ever handle. 5 terabytes a day of transfer of data across the wire. And Apple has said, how much is a petabyte? If you're looking at sort of Instagram style pictures, it's 1 billion photos you can store. And it doesn't come out of your iCloud storage or my iCloud storage, it comes out of my app's iCloud storage. So it's free to users as well. There's no cost to them data storage wise, just for me. So it's a new Apple way of sending things to the cloud and storing them. And when it was announced, I'm like, I can't quite get this. I can't quite wrap my brain around this.
It doesn't fit into my worldview of Apple.
Correct, yeah, because there's been things like Pars before from Facebook, which is a much smaller, simpler system. There was StackMob for a while, which was acquired by PayPal very quickly. But there's no configuration, no hassle. I just say, Apple, here's my object for my app, put it in the server. It figures out what that object looks like, all the things got inside it, and stores it away efficiently in its database and sends it back to me. I can have public databases, of everyone's stuff, or private ones just for you or just for you, with one extra line of code. They've made it ridiculously simple, and I was sitting there just blanking. What kind of apps can I make with this? I mean, seriously, if you have any ideas for apps, hit me up, because it was such a big, world-changing thing to do. Because before, if you wanted to do anything talking to a server, you have to go ahead and write, Ruby on Rails or PHP or whatever, and get hosting somewhere, and keep the database up to date, and security, and yada yada yada. Massive pain. Not anymore.
So what do you write for CloudKit in Swift?
It's Swift or Objective-C. It doesn't really matter. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same. And it's available in iOS and OS 10, so you can sync things across very, very easily. And of course, it's backed by iCloud. So when you connect to my app, if you have an iCloud account, I don't have to say, log in. It just goes, oh, hello Matt, hello Chris, and you're away with your own private data store immediately for free. Which is, as I say, it's once you think what they've done, it makes massive services like Amazon Web Services, for example, almost obsolete overnight for most developers.
And AWS was always praised for being a very cheap way of delivering data,
cheap, and that's
and
free.
very scalable. But
correct.
It did seem like this makes the $99 developer account the most astonishing bargain ever.
Correct. I just get this stuff for free, and I'm like, well, I can make an app just for myself and just store stuff on this for 1 petabyte of storage. Why don't I pay for iCloud ever again?
Is the petabyte for you as a developer?
Me as
if you make
I believe
of apps,
it's per app at this time.
Huh?
1 petabyte per app.
I believe it's per app.
Interesting.
And they've tried to explain it in the database doc, saying like normally it's one app to one database, but it can be many apps to one database or one app to many databases. Okay. It's a bit hairy. Yeah, I haven't watched the advanced talk yet, and WWDC stream. I only watched the basic talk. But so far, it's caused my brain to segfault slightly. Like staring at this, going, "What can I do now?" Because that's the difference it's made.
I've seen even games developers who are hugely excited about it already, saying the multiplayer stuff I could do with this is...
You can store anything you like up there, and as what's called a key value store. Here's some data, just save it for me and give it back to me, which will do.
To be clear, it is storage purely. It's not like Azure. It's not a computing platform.
It's well, you say that, but it's cleverer than that, because if you imagine, say if I was making an app that said, tell me all messages posted in this vicinity, right? I could query that 1 second, query, you post messages being posted. Massive battery life drain, massive network drain. They have server-side queries. You can say, run this query automatically whenever any data changes in this field set, and it will push a message back to you using push, saying this has changed silently to the app, which launches the app and fires up the update. So yes, there are server-side queries as well. It's ridiculously clever, and it's completely free. It's bonkers. So that is CloudKit, and I'm just so impressed. Like I say, I'm just mind blown, quite frankly, on CloudKit. But it gets better. It gets even better because Apple announced Swift, which is an all-new coding language, and this is historically quite hard to do without generating a lot of flaming. People don't like having all their years of experience sort of poof gone. They don't, obviously they've invested a lot of time and money in that, so they normally get very angry about new coding languages being introduced. And of course, Apple doesn't have very many. You've got Objective-C and AppleScript, but Objective-C basically, and that's it. And for a long time, of course, they were lambasted for having this comedy 1980s language, even though I quite like it. And for a change, developers are responding very, very positively. They're happy to see this new language, which says a lot about Objective-C, quite frankly.
I mean, I have seen plenty of people criticising Swift, but not people who are at WWDC, we should say.
Yeah, and it seems to be a trend for coding languages. There's a particular coding language called OCaml or Haskell, very similar, and we've seen Facebook had a language called Hack recently, which is a PHP with some extras strapped on.
It's the worst SEO'd computing language ever.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, but MS had C# put into F#, and now Objective-C become Swift. And they've followed the same thing. They've followed the same sort of paradigm. And if you're a coder, and I apologise for this to you two, the main difference between the two is what's called first-class functions, which means that a function can now be passed around like any other kind of data, like an integer or some string of text. What that means is you can call a function and pass in number, and another function as part of it. And you can sort of create these recursive functions that do very, very clever things. It's called functional programming. And it means you can suddenly create much, much smaller amounts of code to do the same sort of stuff. So rather than writing, Objective-C is an extremely verbose language. Swift isn't. Swift's the complete opposite. It's the way, way other end of the pendulum for verbosity, which you can write much, much smaller stuff. But so it's cool technically, but what's really cool about it is the fact that they've had these thing called playgrounds, and I think they demoed these in the keynote or one of the foreign talks. So it's what's called REPL. Read, evaluate, print, and loop round. So you can type in text on the thing, shouldn't tap the desk. Type in text on your Mac. Press go, and it executes straight away, and you can see the results. And you can make a change and see the results. Make a change, see the results. So rather than sort of hacking around, guessing what the number should be, which of course no one ever does, you can now hack around and see the results straight away, which is much more convenient. But the really cool bit is that the documentation for Swift is also a playground. So you're reading through and saying, what does that do? Press play. And you'll see what it does live as you're going, tweak and evaluate. And I should say, the documentation, which made by Dave Addy and colleagues,
allegedly.
Well, it's got Dave on the cover, and then references to his font thing, Moon and Space Odyssey, which is cool.
Also the emojis.
Yeah, but it's very, very good documentation, very, very clear, and it's available on day one, and they've done a very, very good job.
But so why has Apple done it? Because one of the big things said about Swift is that it is. There's a much shallower learning curve than with Objective-C. You can play around with it. It's a lot of talk of it being used in schools as a way of developing coding. Great. That means more developers, more apps. That's not a problem Apple has. Apple has a lot of apps.
They do. They I think they avoid what was continuing to use the bastardization of Objective-C. So for a long time they were reliant on something called GCC, a very old compiler system used across Unices, Linuxes, some VSTs, and OS X. And GCC basically didn't care about WWDC. It's a minority language. Most folks don't use it. They use some other language, so it was going nowhere. And what Apple did was they saw some research happening into a compiler called LLVM. Actually hired the guy and contributed a lot of work to that team. And they came up with a new language called WWDC 2.0, which added a lot of features because suddenly they own the compiler again. They can make changes to it, enhancements that make everyone's life less hateful, quite frankly. Because it was simple things like, you've just saved me 50 lines of code by adding this one thing. So I saved time. It's not an apps thing, it's a hate thing. I dislike Apple's coding language less now. And they kept on doing it, and they kept on adding more and more magic hacks, syntactic sugar, enhancements and stuff. And there's only so far you can take it. I mean, if you're an Objective-C coder, you'll know the @ symbol was getting abused to death in Objective-C. It was terrible. And I'm glad they said, listen, we can carry on doing this, or we can just say, let's you've done well, Objective-C.
Off you go to pastures.
That'll do, pig. You go over there. Let's have a new language which doesn't require bastardizing, and it can be fresh. And you're right, it does boost developers. And actually, it's quite important. Apple does care about education a lot, and suddenly it's not painful to teach people how to code on Apple systems. Particularly in one-to-one iPad schools, having to Objective-C was very painful. So that is Swift, very, very cool. The last thing I want to talk about is the body count at DubDub. Because every year people take
You mean the hangovers?
Just developers littering Moscone.
Because every year Apple, of course, announce new things. And very often those things happen to have already been done by other developers on Apple who are doing very well for themselves. Recent example, the most popular one is Instapaper. And of course, it's not always a bad thing. I believe Marco said when the announcement was made from Apple, I believe this will raise awareness of this.
When it introduced the
reading list
in Safari, it will raise awareness of the need for this tool, and people will choose Instapaper.
He then sold Instapaper.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you have to ask. Even if Apple do half, 75% of a feature, is that enough?
Yeah.
So one particular one they showed off, I think in the keynote, was the ability to do what's called view debugging in Xcode, where you can say, I've got a button on the screen somewhere, I can't see it. Let me just tilt it into 3D in Xcode and have a look behind it. Very, very cool. That's been done already by a company called Reveal. And Reveal have said, we're confident our thing offers better functionality. It probably does. But is that enough?
Yeah.
I get that thing free in Xcode, and it does half the work. That's probably enough. So the body count, people are saying, was pretty high this year. And I didn't
Sherlocking, as we call it. In
Sherlocking, yes, well, because of obviously Watson in the past. Well, do you want to explain the history briefly?
Watson was an app made by an independent company, Karelia Software. Apple then introduced Sherlock, which was essentially the same thing, killed it off. And then Karelia Software introduced Sandbox. And then Apple introduced iWeb.
Which failed.
Which failed, absolutely. But Karelia, bless them, were Sherlocked twice.
Yes. So what's the body count this time around? So we've obviously seen Objective-C has been, and let's face it, it has been deprecated in place of Swift. Apple haven't said that, but I've watched so many videos now from WWDC, and it's been Swift from the examples.
Yeah, they're going to do that, even if they weren't, even if they were deprecating.
We don't know. The reaction could have been terrible. We don't actually know. So that's gone. Pars, Facebook's server system's gone away in favour of CloudKit. OpenGL, of course, is Metal. Reveal is gone away because of the new Xcode tools. We've got Dropbox. Oh, we'll have to see. I use Dropbox. You pay for Dropbox. Yeah. Dropbox. We'll have to see on that
Dropbox will survive for a while. It's the most resilient of all of them, but I suspect that it will survive while Box.net and all the other ones really, really struggle.
Yeah.
Dropbox has got enough mind share and momentum and users to keep going. But when you get X gigabytes for 5 gigabytes for free as an Apple customer and pay for more at a very low rate, there's no reason for you to go elsewhere. For most people.
Alfred, do you reckon Alfred's had it with new Spotlight?
Did you see they posted very quickly?
They were bullish.
A response. They think
everyone's bullish.
Their response was the same as Marco Arment's. We do a lot more. We're reasonably confident,
and it's much more extensible as well.
Yes.
Alfred, there's a bunch of those kind of launcher apps, Quicksilver and that sort of stuff as well. The new Spotlight functionality does more of that sort of stuff, but looks really... it's not so much the functionality of it, it just looks really like Alfred, this big box in the middle of the screen, the drop-down stuff. It looks like they've gone, that just works.
I'm glad, 'cause I love Spotlight. It's a brilliant feature. It's been in the corner for too long, quite frankly. So I'm glad it's back. Shazam is now in Siri.
Yes.
Which probably means bad for SoundHound and other Shazam-alikes. Let's face it, because there's no reason to have them now, because Siri/Shazam will do it for you. That's probably had it. Nest, do you reckon Nest is in?
No. I can't see, because a lot of people talked about Nest as being killed off because of HomeKit, but in theory there's nothing stopping them integrating with HomeKit. And it depends how the commercial pressures are. Obviously Google owns Nest now, and Google and Apple are at loggerheads and a lot of things, but
it's
they're
in
pragmatic.
Google's interest to tie into HomeKit.
Well, they can tie into it, but I think
that's my point.
They'd like to expand it, I think, to become the HomeKit. I think Nest would have liked to have everything.
Well, they should have done it quicker.
I know. I think so, shouldn't they?
There's nothing stopping them, because we saw that thing about Google putting ads on Nest thermometers.
Yeah.
It can still do that. Like it's not getting in the way of of Google's commercial ambitions for its systems.
Apple didn't introduce anything that actually competes with Nest for me. Most of Nest competitors look like old style thermostats, and that's Nest's.
It's the market they're going at.
Is the design and everything.
WeTransfer, mail drop.
Yeah, a lot
That's
of
the way
those...
to attach things to your mail thing now. It goes via iCloud and then just seems to go down to the Mac at the other side.
Yeah, especially if they add to iCloud Drive the Dropbox-like ability to just send a link to a file to someone. So
Sketch, Evernote's sketchy tool. Gone away in place of Markup, the new email inline marking uppy thing. It's even cleverer than Sketch, because you saw him do the shape recognition as he draws the speech bubble and stuff. Very, very nice. Maybe WhatsApp, but probably not. The new messages.
You have strong views on this.
Not so much.
But certainly it was one of those things.
I don't think it'll kill WhatsApp, because ultimately cross-platform is cross-platform.
Correct.
And Apple only is Apple only. And there's no WhatsApp on the desktop anyway. It's sort of a weird church and state separation in the case of mobile versus...
It's possible at least that this will slow the adoption rate of WhatsApp, because whereas a lot of people might hit the limits of iMessage and get annoyed with it and... what's the word I'm looking for? Give up and go that way. I want to say defecate, but I know that's wrong.
Well, maybe while they're going. But no,
possibly they'll stay with it.
WhatsApp's draw for me is the cross-platform stuff. I think iMessage doesn't compete with that at all.
Defect.
So, there you go. Defenestrate.
Well, there we go. But it was a really, really good WWDC. I think there was some amazing stuff announced. Like nothing consumer facing.
It was really great, interesting keynote, and there was no hardware.
Yeah, it was 2 hours long nearly, and it was absolutely dense, packed, but no hardware.
I mean, we've still got. They keep saying new product categories, but they say there's some coming later this year.
In fact, the Eddie Q say it's the best roadmap he's seen for 25 years.
25 years.
It's nuts.
And so there's so much left to come.
But the show itself was really good, I thought.
And I have to add, I did think it was a bit funny in places. You know, I know it's bad dad jokes. You know, Apple's every dad.
My favourite kind of jokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the comedy was a little sort of like, guys, you've actually just sat down and written that skit, haven't you? You've actually sat down.
Some of it seemed natural. Some of it was a bit forced.
But it was good.
Federighi as the charismatic Jobs replacement. Really works for me. I think he's fantastic.
I mean, it works well because you've got Tim Cook as the straight man, if you like, in the Ernie and Weiss and Mockman Weiss scenario. But you've got Ernie, but you've got Federighi there telling the joke and taking selfies.
And Tim Cook's getting better.
Yeah,
I didn't. The first 2 years I wasn't too sure about it, but now he's got into a stride. As you say, he's striding around the area and feeling more in control. But Air Force One never disappoints.
Well, what's good is that Cook can be magisterial, if you like. He can be the
presidential.
He bestows his presence upon you to explain the numbers, and then Craig comes out and he's just happy to be there and he's having fun.
But there was no Phil. I love Phil so much. No Phil.
No Johnny Ive this time.
Yeah, no Johnny Ive.
No
looking serious. Locked in his little white room.
Yes.
Head on one side.
Did you notice a number of Federighi selfies being passed around on Twitter?
And there were queues, and he was happy to just hang out and just take pictures with everyone who wanted to queue up. And I'd have been all. There's sessions going on. Do you not want to go and learn how to make apps?
But there was something, one of the devs I saw tweeting saying that in previous years Apple has imposed restrictions that we've had to work around. This time it feels like Apple is basically joining hands with us as a community and helping us make better stuff. And that attitude of Federighi's
forming a peace circle around Moscone,
wandering around Moscone.
I think they've accepted the reality that people just tweet stuff without thinking about it. And they can't kick them out because they've paid $14.95 minus a $25 gift card.
And they won the lottery to get there.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, you have to accept that.
But it was an absolute baller show. Let us know what you think of it in the comment section below, obviously. And don't forget to subscribe to MacFormat's YouTube channel, youtube.com/MacFormatUK. Catch up with previous episodes of the MacFormat Weekly Extravaganza at the little link in the middle of the screen here. And obviously try out MacFormat's super duper whiz bang, lovely interactive iPad edition, completely free trial subscription in there at macformat.com/iPad. That's it though from us three for this week, but we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Which way is it?
Both.
One of each.
Yeah, one of each. Yeah.